Hey there, it's Megan from Crookcraft Create, and today I'm really excited to share this card with you. So I'm starting with the layered flowers thin cuts. I've pre-cut my pieces just to make it a little bit easier. So these go just through your die cutting machine, and I've cut, as you can see, a flower, a leaf or a stem, and a little inside. I'm trimming my flower for something different, and this is something that this idea I got from a fellow maker, Shalana Glass. And I really loved how she turned this flower into something quite different. So I'm daubing the edges for a little bit of extra effect. And the flower is cut from Lagoon paper, and I was intending to daub it in Lagoon ink, but my dauber was actually had been used for sapphire ink, so it's a little bit darker than I was intending, but I still love the effect. So I'm just going with that. Once I've daubed the flower, now I'm going to attach it, the two pieces. And as you'll see, this is a little bit of an upside down thinking, out of the box thinking, I think it's called, how we put this together. I think you saw it on the card at the beginning, so it'll all make sense. So with those pieces prepped, we're going to move on to the next step, which is stamping. I'm stamping my sentiment first because I'm going to use some texture paste around it. This is the For All Occasions stamp set, so it's got lots of great sentiments on it for all the different and special occasions that you have. I'm using Thinking of You. So I'm just attaching it to my block. And I'm going to ink this in papaya ink, so it's just a little bit stronger than the peach that I'm going to use later on. So it just gives that nice, the same tone, but with a little bit more impact. I flip my mat because I'm stamping. So our mat is double-sided. One side is for cutting and for using the grid line. The spongy side on the reverse gives you a much better imprint when you're stamping. If you don't have this mat, just use the sponge inserts that come in all of our stamp sets. Okay, that's done. Now we get to think about doing a little bit of playing with the texture paste. So these are card front stencils. They come 3 in a pack. This is the flowery one. So you can see the 3 that come in this pack. We're using this one here with the kind of leaf pattern. So I'm pulling out my all-purpose mat. This is a great mat for doing anything messy because it cleans up so beautifully. And the first thing that we need to do is to mix our texture paste. So I'm using the opaque texture paste with the palette knives. So you just grab out a palette knife that suits you and the way you like to work with things. My opaque texture paste, and I'm using peach ink. Peach is a very subtle colour. You might only just see it here on the screen. So I put a little bit directly onto my all-purpose mat, and now I'm going to work in some of the texture paste. Now this texture paste is actually quite old, so it's a little bit thicker than it would be if you had a fresh pot. If yours does thicken up like this, you can just add a couple of drips of water to loosen it up a little bit. I didn't do that. I've just decided to work with it quite a bit to get it to the right consistency that I wanted. And you can see as I'm putting it and working it into the colour that I laid down onto the mat, that it's just tinting it with that subtle colour, so it's not white. And that's what I wanted. I just wanted a little subtle colour. Now if you're into cake baking, this next part will feel very familiar to you. So what we're going to do, I'm just lining up my stencil, and I'm just going to pick up some of that texture paste and scrape it through and over the stencil. So you can see where you've got it, and this is a very organic look, so I don't want it perfect. I don't want all of the spaces to be filled. I want it to blend out with gaps and bits and pieces, because I do just want that really natural organic look to it. But you can see exactly where the paste is going, so you can know whether you want to add more or less in certain spots. Scrape off the top of the stencil because you can use that paste. Now we're done. I'll lift it up and voila, look at that. How gorgeous is that? And it takes all of a couple of seconds. Once you're done, you do need to clean up your stencil and your mat. And the easiest way to do that with your mat is to simply grab a baby wipe and wipe it all over the mat. And you can use the baby wipe on your palette knife as well. For your stencil, you want to get that and wash it off under a tap and some water as quickly as possible so that it doesn't dry on there. The texture paste, especially if you lay it down quite thinly, it doesn't take very long to dry. So you do want to clean up as soon as you can after you've used it. It just makes the whole process that much easier. Okay, let's work at finishing off this card, putting it together. So this is the centre of my flower. I'm just adhering it down. I'm going to put my stem on, and because it's such a fine little piece, I'm actually just grabbing my all-purpose mat. I'm turning this upside down and I'm running my adhesive tape over it. Now my adhesive tape is wider than the stem, but by running it over the all-purpose mat, the adhesive is only going to go on the paper. It doesn't stick to the adhesive mat. So it's a really easy way. I could have grabbed out a glue pen, but that would have taken more time, and I've got the adhesive runner on my hand. So it's just an easy way of doing that. So I'm just placing this all on the card as and how I want it. You'll see that. And then the last thing that I want to do is add a little bit of bling. We've always got to have bling, right? So for this bling I'm using to adhere it, I'm using my liquid glass. And I'm just going to squirt it into the center of my flower. And I'm also putting a little dot after the thinking of you, because I want to add one of my little itty bitty beads onto there. So these are my beads. For that single one, I'm picking just a single one up with my tweezers and popping it where I dropped that adhesive, the liquid glass. And for a few more, I'm just picking them up with my fingers out of the container. And then for those that I want to be more controlled over, I'm using the tweezers to drop them into the liquid glass. And all I'm going to do is let that dry to finish off. And that's it. A beautiful, simple card complete. The only thing left to do is add it to the card base. What do you think?